Chapter 11. Raising his head, he tuned it in the direction of the sound of flowing water. He wrinkled his nose, catching the scent of fresh water. "Trout," he murmured. "There will be fish and something fresh to eat." He raised his voice as if talking to someone. When he glanced around, it was only him. Was he losing his mind? A decision was made. He had to reach the water, and it was at the bottom of the hill, so he crawled in that direction to the river. Lycell didn't question why he should hear water from what appeared to be a mile away, or smell it. He knew there were fish in the water, and that meant food. He needed fresh running water and fish, so he made the fateful decision to go in that direction. But if he was a hunter, he knew to beware. It wasn't likely bears would be out in December, but what about mountain lions? He had to risk it. Looking up, he paused a second, trying to see through the trees towering over him. "What time is it?" he murmured. Now he didn't feel any pain. "Am I dying?" He didn't want to die, at least until he found out who the beautiful woman was smiling at him and distracting him as he drove. Somehow he knew it was just his mind fucking with him when he swerved to avoid hitting her, but she was real in his mind, and he did know that. And as long as he could keep her in his mind, he would have the strength to press on. The knowledge that he loved the woman gave him comfort, and so he pulled his body along with grit, with willpower, and with extraordinary upper body strength. Questioning himself about the woman every few minutes helped focus his mind. Unable to remember if it was the kind of love for a friend or a wife, at the moment he didn't care, because her very existence gave him the courage and stamina to live to find out. Maybe she was his mother. But why didn't he know that? No one forgets their mother. But he forgot everything, including his name. Then it became obvious to him. His amnesia had to do with the accident. When he pulled himself along the rocks and the snow-soaked ground, still bleeding, but even that had lessened. He inched down in the direction of the running water. He took a needed breath and looked down to measure the distance of where he had to go to reach the riverbank. There was still a long way he had to travel. Lycell took a look at his options and decided to roll down the hill. "What do I have to lose? It couldn't get any worse," he muttered. He leaned over and remembered how as a child he would roll down a steep hill. So he began his descent, and he rolled over branches and rocks covered by the deep snow. Now he didn't feel the pain of his shoulder and the weight of his legs. Freedom descended over him as he moved like a snowball down a mountain. He closed his eyes, and when he stopped moving, he opened them, and he could hear the rushing water. It was much closer now. Rolling over on his stomach, he resumed, letting his large muscular arms do the work once again. Crawling to the bank, he leaned over and saw his face in the clear, cold water. He slanted his head to the side. Who is this? He didn't even recognize his own face. What the fuck? Thirsty, he lapped up the sparkling water. He saw fish swimming in the stream, and he leaned further than he should have to catch it, and to his surprise he reached for it, and with a quick grasp he had the fish in his hand. Laughing and examining it, he said, "I bet if I had used bait and a fishing rod, I wouldn't have been this lucky." Turning in the direction of the sound, Lycell spotted a large pregnant black bear headed his way, looking for a last-minute meal before hibernating. He had nowhere to go but into the freezing water. Falling forward with a large splash, he tumbled into the icy river. The brisk, cold flowing water moved him, and the fish he grasped firm in his hand. Hunger motivated him, and he wouldn't drop the fish because he didn't know if he would have food again, or be alive to appreciate eating. Especially if another bear waited for him at the end of this river. Lycell didn't have much fight left. He let it take him along with limbs and fallen trees. What could he do? His arms were now cold and stiff. His legs had long ceased to work. He was like a log caught up in the currents of the water, and it wouldn't stop until it came to the end of its destination, and that was soon. He heard the waterfall before he saw it, but he couldn't do anything about it. All he could do was hope that he would see another day, where he could find that woman and look into her eyes. That was his short-term plan for now. Live long enough to see the beautiful woman. As the waterfall came near, he closed his eyes and said a prayer. He didn't know how or why he learned to pray, but wanted to pray. Could it be his mother had taught him? And then he saw his mother. He recognized her face as his mother, as his naked cold body was being pulled over the waterfall and down with the stream of water. He had for some unexplained reason remembered his mother's face. He felt relieved to know the beautiful woman wasn't his mother. Maybe his memory was coming back. Did he have to go through another traumatic incident to retrieve his memory, he thought. He couldn't handle many more like this. He lay holding on to a large branch as he came up for breath. All appeared calm now. It wasn't snowing, he could see the sunlight, and for once he was at peace moving along. Did he just die from his fall? He wondered. Glancing in his hand in a tight grip lay the fish. It was still alive, and he was alive. He bit the head off and spit it away, and took a bite of it as he spit out the scales. That would keep him for a time. He discovered things about him that confounded him. For one, he was a terrific swimmer. He smiled at the thought. But what was it about him where he could survive in the cold of winter and a freezing lake, and barely feel the cold? Reaching and grabbing onto a branch of a tree, Lycell pulled himself to the bank. He still had his strength. But that was a mystery. Never had he heard of this before. He didn't think there was anything unusual about him. He was a man, and his endurance would go only so far. With his arms splayed out and him lying on his stomach, he laid there breathing hard. He didn't think he had any more strength to crawl with his arms. His arms had worked enough, and they were tired and injured from the gunshot wounds. His breathing loud and shallow, he lay there until he could figure out what to do next. He didn't remember falling asleep, but when he woke, a snowflake had settled on his lips, waking him from his dreams and bringing him into his nightmare. Heavy snow had completely covered him. Lying in that spot he could freeze to death. He had to keep moving, and moving he did. The land was more leveled now, and the trees less dense. Lycell pulled his powerful arms through the grass with his once strong legs moving helplessly along. Because he hadn't used his legs, so he thought they were still inoperative, and besides they hurt. Darkness had taken over the starless sky. But he kept moving until he reached a small cabin setting alone surrounded by high grass. When the clouds moved he could see the moonlight. It wasn't hard to make out that the house had been deserted long ago. The panes in the windows, those that remained, were cracked and broken. The shutters had fallen off on the windows from what Lycell could see. Parts of the roof set discarded on the porch. It would take a few more minutes to reach it. So he kept going through soft snow and rotten planks until he touched the door. The door creaked open. It had been abandoned all right. "Shelter," he whispered. "Food. I need food." He crawled and hobbled around looking under the cabinets. "Nothing," he said in despair. Pulling himself up as he leaned on a stick he found, trying to stand on his feet, he held on to the counter with one hand leaning on it and searched the top of the cabinets with the other hand. Pulling down broken plates, not finding anything to eat, he sunk down near an old wood stove. There was no way he could warm himself. Then he spotted a blanket lying on a broken chair near the table. He grabbed it and rolled himself in it to sleep. But how could he sleep? He had to figure out how to get out of the woods and to a highway. From what he knew, he had traveled miles from where he first started out, and crawled and walked with the help of a stick for a crutch. He headed north away from his home, but he didn't know that. All he thought about was he had to find the woman in his dreams. Obviously the cabin had been abandoned, and therefore no one would come to help him. Then he heard a blood-curdling cry of a pack of wolves. "Oh fuck me. It's over," Lycell whispered to himself. He crawled around looking for something to build a fire, but nothing he could see or reach. He tried to hide in one of the cabinets, but it was too small or filled with junk. Pulling the bottles and tools out, he tried squeezing in the open door. It was too small and his legs hung out. Listening, he knew the wolves were coming, and he had to find a place to go. When he looked in front of him, there was a door. "A basement," he murmured. Crawling on the floor, he reached the door to the basement as he heard the sound of paws on the creaking old floors. Leaning up, he reached for the knob. He exhaled. Locked. Placing himself in a corner with the stove on one side and an old fridge on the other, Lycell sat huddled in the middle of the two. He touched on the floor and felt a large knife with jagged edges, and with his long fingers he pulled it to him. Lycell didn't ever remember being this afraid in his life. It wasn't that he was afraid to die, he didn't want to leave the woman. If he had to leave, he wasn't going easy because he wanted to find the woman whose face haunted him. If he could only remember her name, he would be happy, but it wouldn't come. Lycell closed his eyes, and for some reason he opened them moments later. When he looked through the dark, he saw 4 pairs of yellow eyes staring at him. These were the wolves who would put him out of his misery, he thought. But they stood there gazing at him, not blinking, as if waiting for instructions. The alpha of the pack took a few steps in Lycell's direction. He raised his knife. A large kitchen knife caught the wolf's eye. The blade sharp and glowing. But that wouldn't stop the wolves from attacking. They would circle him patiently, waiting for their chance. Waiting for him to fall asleep. If it took all night, they would never leave until they got their prey. Then the alpha raised his head and let out a howl. The beta wolves barked a low whimper. Before the alpha lowered his head, he took one more step in Lycell's direction, sniffed and backed off. And the other 3 followed him into another room. The alpha turned quickly and back again, and the 3 shadowed him out of the house, leaving Lycell sitting on the cold floor, tired, hungry, sleepy, broken, bewildered, and dying. When Lycell finally closed his eyes, Damon was opening his.